Welcome back to part 2 of our Craigslist clone. In this video we will be improving the UI and UX of our app, and we'll have notifications that are more UI friendly, and we'll add the ability to reply to messages, and those messages will be sent directly to the user who created the post, so they will get that via email. And I just want to say before we get into the video, if you guys are enjoying this content and perhaps you want to use this clone for your own business idea, you can actually check out the link in the description below where I am selling this clone on my website. But if you enjoy the content, do subscribe to the channel, as I will be creating a lot more MVPs like this in the future. So with that out of the way, let's jump back into our old version of the Craigslist MVP where we got to at the end of the last video. And you'll see that it's very different here. The styling is much more simple. Everything's quite grayscale. There's actually no style sheets included at this point. So one of the things we're going to do here is set up Bootstrap within our application. Now we can do that by installing the gem directly like this, putting in the version number. And you can also do it using Yarn as well. So Yarn is like a package manager in Rails 6. And I think you can get it also in Rails 5, but for me it was a transition when I started using Rails 6. It's taken some time to get used to it unless you are very familiar with modern day JavaScript frameworks. And you will see here in this video that I start by avoiding the Yarn approach. So I'm doing it the traditional way here in Rails, but in the end I actually revert back to doing it with Yarn. So you will see that in a few minutes. We can install Bootstrap, jQuery, and many other plugins using Yarn. But it's just a bit of a different approach to how you do things, and it takes a bit of a learning curve trying to figure out how the new JavaScript structure is in Rails 6. So I've skipped forward a little bit in the video, but you can see here that I'm using Yarn to add jQuery to the app, and then I will also do the same for Popper.js and Bootstrap too. Now within our environment.js in our Webpack folder under config, we have used Webpack here to say that we're basically declaring some namespaces within the app to say that jQuery will be represented by the $, and you can do that for different plugins you're using within your app. So let's reload this and see what's happening here. And at this point it looks like I've made a mistake, I think, when installing Popper here, because it should be Popper.js. But for me this is a little bit of a learning curve on using Yarn. So this is the first application I've really started using Yarn in, but it's something I need to get better at myself, and perhaps when I understand it a lot better I can create content more around that in the future. But if we look inside our package.json file, we can see that now we have got these additional plugins installed. We've got jQuery and we've got Popper in here. So I encountered a few issues when setting this up, but overall I got things working after some trial and after some searching online trying to debug some of the issues I was experiencing. But in the end I set this up using Yarn, so I've added Bootstrap, Popper.js and jQuery. So originally I made the typo and put in Popper instead of Popper.js, which caused me some problems initially, but you can see here that the proper version is there, and we can actually use Yarn remove to take out that requirement where I messed up the spelling. But here within the environment.js we've got these values declared, and then within our application.js under our packs folder we've got this import for Bootstrap, and then we're also importing the Bootstrap Sass file here, which is just a reference to the Sass of Bootstrap itself. So as you can see here that our template has basically lost all its layout right now, but we're going to go and modify that to include the Bootstrap markup. I've also removed these gems which we no longer need, as we're using Yarn to install these modules. So with that out of the way, let's go and update our templates. So let's begin by changing the markup here. So we'll set this to header, and we'll need to create a container. Then we'll want to break this into columns. So we'll have a small column on the left and then a wider one on the right, and then we'll add a row here just to wrap these columns. And now on our home page we have this list of categories, and you can see here in the CSS that we are just breaking this and we're floating this left in with a fixed width, but what we want to do here is break this into columns, and we'll put a row around that. And now our layout is starting to look quite reasonable here, but we can push each of these columns down to give it better spacing using the margin bottom class from Bootstrap. Now we can separate the styling of the header categories by making them dark. So we'll add that text dark class to kind of break up this blue color a little bit. And now we will try to improve the styling of this header at the top of the page. So the first thing we want to do with that is move it inside a container. So we'll put a container class on this div and within a row, and then set a column. So we'll make a full column for this, full width, and we can see the alignment has now been corrected. Now we can change these to float right, these classes. So that's a Bootstrap class for floating the element to the right, and then we'll want to set a margin on those to space them out a little bit. So we can play around with this and get the spacing right, but I think this is good enough for us for now. And then we'll also want to improve this home navigation, push it down a little bit from the top of the page. And then we can make these a darker text, these links at the top. So we'll add a class for text dark just to separate them from the body links on the page. So break the color up a little bit. And we can also style up our breadcrumb navigation, so we can add the same class to make those links a darker color also. And then again we will style these create new post and Craigslist clone name at the top to be a darker color. However, what we'd really like for the new post button would be really to have this as an actual Bootstrap button, so like the success button. So that's looking a little bit better now. And you could even do that with the post link at the top right of the page. But that's really up to yourself how you want to style this. But I think maybe just having the one button is good enough. And what we can do then is space these links, these page links down to create some space between that and the new post button. Now these links at the top right, I think we can improve this. We don't really need to have two post buttons. So we have one on the left and one at the top right. So we can take that out first. And so we have the dashboard link and my account, but those are basically doing the same thing. So one should really be sign in or out, and one should link then back to the dashboard. So you can see here we have a conditional that says if the account is signed in, we'll show the sign out button. So let's change the my account button to be a sign in button if the user is not signed in already. And then we can also add a registration button or a sign up button if the user is not signed in. So we'll have those two options on screen. And we can actually take out this My Account button, which you don't really need right now. So we can have that link up at the top right once the user is signed in to take them to the dashboard. So now we want to style up our login page and also our sign up page. So we can do that under our device views within our application views. So let's go in here and add some classes to make it more bootstrap friendly. So our form is quite wide right now, so we can wrap this within a column or a row and then a column. So make that column about half the size of the page. And we can also improve the layout of these links at the bottom of our sign-in form. So we would like to have those placed next to each other, and we'll change the classes on those links too. So we will add some spacing using the margin left, and then we will add a text dark class to make the links darker color. And we can actually move that to margin right instead. And then we can push those links a little bit down the page to space out from the rest of the form. So to do that, we'll just add another row and a column here, and then we will set a margin top class on the row itself. So the styling for this is looking pretty good right now. And the next thing we are going to do is use a new font within our application. So we're going to just pick one here on Google Fonts. And we really want to just style the headline, the heading text a little bit. So within our CSS, we are going to make a reference then to load this font. And we want to do this specifically for the heading tags. So we'll do H1 to H3 here, or H4, and we'll also include the classes. So if it has a class of H1 attached to a paragraph text, for example, it will still show that font. And you can see here now that we've got these headings changed, so that is looking good. But we also need to style up this sign up page just the way we did with the login page. So I'm going to fast forward through the styling of the sign up page, as it's a little bit repetitive, as we've already done it for the sign in page. And while doing that, I'm also styling up the validation message that comes back if you make a mistake while filling out the form. So by default, they include these line breaks next to the field which is invalid. But we just want to hide that and make our form look a little bit more user-friendly even when there is an error. So now we have our login and sign up page both looking pretty good right now. So now we can log in and see how things look within the dashboard. But we are noticing here that you can also create new posts while you're on the login page. So by default, the create new post will redirect you back to the login page if you're not already signed in. So we really want to hide this link on this sign in, sign up page. So let's create a new helper method to do that. So this is going to be very similar to the isHome method we have, except the controller name will be session and registrations. So you can see that we've added these links to the login page, but we've removed the create new post button. And everything is looking good here so far. We want to space these print reply buttons out, however. So we want to push that print button off to the right. And then we can add a class to this to make it look more like a button. So we can add a button secondary to give it that gray color. And we'll make the button small. And the reply, I think we should remove the reply button from here, the reply link, and move it further down the page. And we can also space out the headline with the body copy. And I feel like this link at the top for reply should really be a bit more dominant. So that's a call to action. We want people to click on it, so we really want to move it down to the bottom and make it look more like a button. And I think on these top level categories, we can make them a little bit different. Maybe have a background color, change the font, make them stand out a little bit, just to give this homepage some design element to it. So let's create a heading here for this link. So we'll give it a H4, which is actually quite big actually. So we can shrink this down a bit, H5 or H6. So now let's create a background color. So first we will require our category style sheet. And we can remove some of these old styles which are not relevant anymore. And then we will add a background color for this. We're saying if it's a category box with a class of H6 inside, then let's use this background color and some padding. And you can see our links underneath the top categories are actually kind of out of line with the parent category. So we can use this subcat class to push those, or to inset those links a little bit to match the parent category above. So now looking at our dashboard once we are signed in, we can quickly see here that the new post screen is requiring some styling. So let's tidy that up first. And we will wrap each of these input fields in a form group class to give it the proper spacing. And then we will also need to style this drop-down menu properly. So we'll push the input field onto a new line, and then we want to add this form control class. So one thing to note here is the sizing of this headline, this header text. So let's go and fix these. They should be really H2 at the largest. And we can also make this form a little bit thinner, so we can make it half the page width. And we can also remove this back button, backlink at the bottom of the form. So I don't think that's necessary here. We just want to keep things very simple. So now let's try adding a post. So we can see here that this message is being put in a very strange place. This post was successfully created. So that's the message that's coming back from our controller. And we can see our print button is working fine. But we should really move this message that comes out and make it more presentable to the user. So let's see if we can track this down first. So we've got this notice being presented on the application layout. So let's move this to the bottom of the page first. So what we can do to make these notifications better is use a gem called Toaster. So Toaster allows the message that's sent back from the controller to be styled in a proper notification styling. So it will pop up on the screen, and you can set it to stay for 10 seconds, and then it will fade out. It just looks much nicer to the user. And as you can see here, I've installed Toaster using Yarn. So once you have it set up, this is how the notification will look. See this signed out successfully pop up here. So just to show what I've done to get that working, if we go to our console, we can see I've installed using Yarn, and then within our Yarn log file you can see the version here that's been included. And within our application.js, you can see that I'm importing toaster and then setting some options and then declaring toaster as a global variable from JavaScript. So that is enough to get this thing working. And then within our application helper, I've also added this Ruby code to set the output. So it creates a script tag, outputs this toaster notification to the browser, and then we include that from the bottom of our application layout. So we include that helper. Now we are going to replace our Craigslist clone text with a logo. So I've used a free logo generator. You can get a bunch of these online just to create a template logo for us for this application. And I think adding a logo will just make the homepage look a lot better and make our application in general look a lot better. So let's try this out. And we'll need to scale this down a little bit. So we can set a max width on this image. And now we can add some margin to space this logo out. So let's create a class for this on the image. And what we can do here is move our breadcrumb navigation over to the right column. So just align that with the body content. And then we will need to push our logo down the page further. And you can play around with this further, but we just want to align the navigation, the breadcrumb navigation off the top of the logo to make it look a little better. And that's looking quite reasonable now, so I think we're good with that. And this breadcrumb navigation is actually a little bit difficult to tell the links between the text. If you go to the post name, the text and the links are the same color. So we should probably just change these links to be a normal link color and just keep the text as the dark color. And at the top here, I'm going to add a line just to separate the top navigation area from the body content. Now this is a very subtle change, but I think it'll really help the design feel of the page. So let's add a solid color for the margin, or for the border bottom, and then a margin just to space the content down. And then we'll include that from our application style sheet. So we can remove all this old data as it's no longer required. And we're going to delete the scaffolding CSS file just completely. And you can see the new line has been added here. And I think it just adds a little bit of a nice touch to the page. So the next thing we want to do here is update these categories to include SEO-friendly URLs. Now, if you remember back to the beginning of the first video, we did include a URL for our categories. So that's already in the database. So what we need to do then is just change this structure of how we're accessing this URL. So we'll be using the link to find that category within the database. So previously we're using the ID, and we'll need to set up a new route for that, and we'll use the URL as part of that. So we'll use a URL as part of that route get request, and then we will use the show view as the method that we're pointing to. And then we will also need to update the path that we've used to show this category on the home page, for example. So we will change that to show category path, since that is the name of this route, and we will change it then for all of the places that we are calling that. So we can see that this is working now for the activities category, but our breadcrumb navigation still needs to be updated. So let's set the new path within that. So we need to pass in the URL. So we must have missed that when we were updating it the first time. And then again for each of these links in the breadcrumb. So we need to pass in the parent.url. So by default it will use the ID, but we need to be using the URL for that. So that's working now, and that will help us a lot in terms of SEO. So we want our categories to be SEO friendly. So the next thing we want to do is look at this reply button. So we can see on Craigslist that they use an email address to handle this reply feature. And if you click the contact info, it doesn't really work correctly, but what we'll do here is we will click this reply button and then we'll show a form for the user to fill out. And then our goal will be to send the values of that form directly to the user's email address. So we will set an ID on this link, and then we will create some JavaScript to handle this link when it gets clicked. But first let's create the form that we will show to the user for gathering their inquiry. And in this form we will want to include an email field. So we want to tell the author of this post who has been emailing or who has contacted them. So we give them an email address, and then we want a message as well, so the user can have a free text area message, so they can input a paragraph or several paragraphs that will be sent to the user. And then we need a hidden field of post ID, so that is very important for us here. So we'll use a post ID to find out all the details we need about this post. So now we're setting up a new route for this on our routes file. So we'll be using a post request, and that will be sent to the public controller. So we've created a new method here in the public controller, and then in here we want to use this post ID to select the post from the database. So we'll use the params to find that, and then if this post exists, then we want to handle some additional code in here. So initially we'll just run we'll log a message to the Rails console first, just to see if we've got that far. And what we can also do here is set we can pre-populate that email field if the user is signed in. So if they have an account and they're signed in, then we will use the email of that user to populate that. Otherwise it will be blank, be a nil value. And then we can also wrap this form in a row with a 50% width column for larger screens. And it will just help the layout a little for us. And then I'm going to wrap this entire form inside a ID of contact form. And the reason we want to do that is that we want to be able to toggle the visibility of this form when the user clicks that show message or send message button. So let's just tidy up our markup a little bit, add some additional wrapping form group classes. So this will just fix up the spacing. And we can also add labels to make the fields more, make it more clear for the user what information they need to add. And we can also add a background color to this form. And then finally some padding to make the whole thing look a little more UI friendly. So now we can set a default style for this contact form, and we want to hide it once the page loads, so we'll set a display none for this, and then we'll include that in our application style sheet. So the form has been hidden, as you can see, and the next step then is to take this show contact form button, and we will use the JavaScript to toggle that visibility of that form. So we'll create a new posts JavaScript file under our JavaScript packs folder. So we've created a source folder in here for that. And then in here we'll use jQuery just to really quickly attach a one-click event for that button. And then we'll select the form and show that to the user. So when we click on this link, you will notice that it follows the link and it shows a hashtag in the URL. So a quick way to try and prevent this is preventing default action on that element. So the default action on a link is obviously to link to another page. So we're trying to prevent that from happening. And we don't really know that our code is being called here at the moment, so we're just running a log message to see if it can pick that up. And again, we're not seeing that message in the log, so in this case we've made a typo. We have not included the hashtag at the front of the ID. So now we can see that it's working. We can remove our logging and we will revert back to this prevent default method that we have. And we can also hide the button that we've clicked right now. So once the form appears, we'll hide that show or that send message to user button. So it disappears now. That's working great. So now let's try this form out. Let's fill it out and give it a test run. And we're getting an error message now, and I think this is related to our routes. So we can see here that we've made a typo. This should be a hashtag and not a /. And let's try this once more. And getting a different message this time. So it looks like the post ID parameter is not being set correctly here. So let's have a look at our form again. And we can see the data being posted is incorrect. So if we look at our form again, it looks like we have missed something here. And if we inspect this element, we can see that the value is not being set correctly. And I'm just trying to debug this at this point. And it looks like we forgot to include the tag, so it should be a hidden field tag. And we can remove this value. And now it's looking much better. That looks correct this time. So let's give this one more go. And now we can see that the message is in the console, the Rails console. So the message has been sent. So that's working correctly. Now let's add the code to send the email. So we'll create a new contact mailer for this. And we're going to pass in the post ID. And we will call the deliver now method. So we want to send this email straight away to the author of the post. And so let's go ahead and we will now set up a new mailer. So we will extend that from our application mailer, and then we'll create this method for the inquiry. And we're passing in the post ID, and we can just copy and paste this post.find method here. And then if this post exists, so if this post is present, then we will trigger the send mail function. So we're going to be sending this email to the account that created the post. And we'll set a subject here, and we can actually include the post name or title in the subject of the email. And then we will need to create a new folder for this HTML mailer and the text mailer to be placed inside. So we're going to set these up now. And in here we will include the name, and we can include some details of the post in here. So you have received a new message from your post. And then we can output the message itself. So let's set up the text version. We can just copy and paste this content in. and then strip out all of the tags. And now we can set this message value here in the contact mailer. So we'll pass this in from the controller, and then it will be available within the templates, the HTML and text templates for the email. We will change this post to a local variable, and then we will set a name instance variable, which we will only want to use that. We only want to set those values if that post exists. And back in our controller now, we'll also pass in that message as a parameter. So let's try this out to see what happens now. And it looks like we're using the wrong column here, so this should be title instead of name. And now we're getting this issue about the account. So we need to check, so basically we need to check here that the account has a relationship with the post. So the post should belong to an account. So let's update this. And now after reloading, we can see that the email has been sent. So there's two versions, the HTML and the plain text version. But one thing we are missing here is the email of the inquirer. So whoever's sending this message for this as a reply to this post, we need to capture their email, and then we will send that email to the creator of that post. So that will be part of the email they get for that reply to their post. So let's add a condition here to ensure that this account exists before we try to send an email to it. So now I'm going to update this email template just to include the title of the post so that the user knows exactly what post the response is for. So after this email has been sent, we want to redirect the user back and give them a success message so they know that their inquiry has been sent. So we can do that using redirect to, and we can include a flash message if the post inquiry is successful. And we can also do one if it's not successful, and we'll pass that in as a danger message. So that will be using Toaster to display these messages, the plugin we installed earlier. And we can go ahead now and test this out and see how the notification looks. But there is one thing we forgot to do, and that is capture the email address and display it within the email content. So let's pass that in quickly before we test this out. So just an additional parameter here, and then we will need to set an instance variable. And then finally we will include this instance variable within both versions of the email that we're sending. So let's create a new paragraph and just display that email to the user. And now when we click this, we can see the notification coming up. And just to confirm that we have indeed got the message being passed through, and we're sending the email and message back to the user. And there are two forms of that email, the HTML and text version. So that's about it for this video. I think we've done a good job here. We've gone through our app and we have cleaned everything up. We have the ability to reply to posts. If you want to test out this final version of our Craigslist clone, you can check out the link in the description below. And as I mentioned before in earlier videos, I'm also selling these MVPs, or these clones of apps. If you want to pick up a copy of that, feel free to visit the link in the description below. So I'm selling that on my website. And you can also get other startup related materials on my website. But other than that, if you just want to enjoy the content, do subscribe to the channel and check out more videos on MVP builds I'm doing in the future. But aside from that, have a great day ahead, and I will see you guys in the next video.